let's talk for a while tonight about making mistakes. It's really a very simple matter to understand if we want to do so, as we will see. Our first mistake, obviously, is the inability and the refusal to see a mistake when one is made. I'm not talking so much about mistakes at work or when working around your house, something like that, but mistakes that are concerned with our inner work, with our effort to change the kind of human beings that we are. What is the characteristics of psychological mistakes, of spiritual mistakes? Simplest thing in the world to see. I just have to see how I repeat the same behavior day after day. How I do the same things, say the same things. And I end up right back where I started at the end of the day, psychologically weary, mentally weary, exhausted, wondering how I could have been such an idiot all day long. In other words, the pattern is the same all the time. Nothing changes. I'm just the same old person at the end of the day, right back where I started. So a repetition of errors. Look, what kind of errors? What do I do? I walk into the room nervously whistling, for example, because I didn't walk into the room consciously. Because I was hesitant about something in the room, maybe meeting someone, seeing someone that I had a psychological difference with. And so I make the mistake of not walking into the room consciously. I walk in asleep, putting on some kind of an act to reduce my tension, to do something with all this nervous energy that is bursting out. So obviously I'm going to have to do something else to break the pattern. And we'll see a couple of those a little later on in detail. But I'm going to have to see that my first and greatest mistake is my inability to see one as a mistake. You'll never convince me of it by telling me about it, because all day long life is telling me that I'm a great error. My whole life is a mistake, for heaven's sake. Every time I get angry, I get jealous, I get tense. That anger and tension and jealousy is telling me that I am a mistake. My whole nature is in error. You think it's going to be easy to tell me about this? You think it's going to be easy to correct something that I've taken as being right all my life? Not at all. I have this familiar wall up that we talked about, and I'm not going to see what you are trying to tell me or what life is trying to tell me. So what am I going to have to do about it? You think with me now, and you'll see what I'm trying to tell you, and it's very difficult to tell you this by using words. But you catch a glimpse of it so that you can do it for yourself. And I'll put it in the form of a question. Can you see how much you resist appearing ridiculous? Appearing to be a failure, appearing to be out of control of your life, which you are. You know, it's an odd thing, isn't it? A woman can be out of control inwardly, outwardly. They're putting on a good act. We're very fine actors and actresses. Putting on an act, being out of control emotionally, mentally, privately, secretly. And the only thing that concerns us is putting on the appearance of being in control. Isn't that a dreadful mistake, to want to appear to be right? See how we fear the bitter medicine, which could be ridicule, which could be another person seeing through me. And it's a different thing with each one of us. Where, I'll ask the question again, where are you making a mistake by refusing ridicule, which, if seen clearly and properly, could set you free? You're overweight and you want to be nice and slender? You're old and you want to be young again? You went 6 years to college and now you can't even find work as a janitor? You want people to like you at the same time knowing you're not very, very likable? So the stage performance becomes very polished. And we say nothing matters but to keep up the appearance. Refusing to see our own, and I'll use this word, ridiculousness in the way we're living. All right, now think of the word motive. And I'll ask you another question. Do you think, or let me see your hands on this, please. Do you think that you give one motive to the world, but live from another? May I see your hand? What a mistake that is. What a division that is. What a refusal that is to see myself as I am, because if I can see that I'm foolish, I can work with that. Listen to what I just said. If I see that I'm foolish, I can work with that because that is the fact. If I refuse to see I'm foolish, that is a lie, and I can't work with a lie. I can only suffer from it. Okay, let's look into motives a little bit. There are good motives, there are bad motives, and there are no motives. A bad motive is anything that works against my waking up. Anything at all, including the stage performance, including the love of feeling persecuted, including feeling that God hasn't treated me nicely, or my wife or husband hasn't. I don't think we have to discuss bad motives very much. What's a good motive? Anything that helps me to wake up. Any determination, any aim that says, I'm going to find something today that's hard for me to do, and I'm going to do it. If it causes me discomfort, good. I'm going to do it in order to produce a shock in myself, in order to create conflict so that I can be conscious of that and win over it. You know what a good motive is, don't you? But you don't know what no motive is. Because when you understand what it means to have no motive at all, then the idea of good motives and bad motives disappears. Not from your mind, but from your life. When do I have a motive? I have a motive when I want to gain something, when I want to attain something, when I want to be spiritual, when I want to be good. I have a motive for that, which is on the level of thought. I must be a good person. I must not be a hypocrite, and so on. So I have a motive there. And on its own level, it is quite necessary, because we said there are good motives. Listen to this now. Do you think that truth with a capital T, reality with a capital R, has a motive of being good? Do you think God has a motive of being decent, of being right, of being true? Do you see how the idea of a motive disappears when you look at it from this viewpoint? There's no motive at all. I have motives on the level of thought. And I can have right motives there to rise above the level of thought to where there be no motives at all. Oh, why did I know this a long time ago, that I don't have to have a motive of being smarter than you, of being better looking than you. I don't have to have a motive at all to prove myself. Isn't that tremendous? I just have to be myself, who I really am. Where's the strain? Where's the competition? Where's the conflict? Where's the jealousy? Where's the envy? Where's the frustration over God or man treating you better than he treated me? Where's my anger? It's all gone. I have a motive to become richer than you, more famous than you. I'm in conflict. Through hard work, I see what an idiot I have been, trying to do the impossible of trying to be someone. How can I be someone? How can I be someone? I can't. I should have noticed it years ago, but I was too thick-headed to do so. In the first place, I get a big thrill out of beating you out of that money, or out of that woman, or out of that position. Boy, then I feel like somebody. Huh? When I rise above the level of thinking and of thought, then there is no motive at all. I just am. I'm right there, the whole thing. Then I have to have the motive on a certain level, obviously. When I get hungry, I have the motive of getting bread. If I'm tired, I have the motive of sleeping. If I'm cold, I have the motive of putting on a jacket. We're not talking about that. We're talking about psychological motives in which I must compete with you, with the world, or with anyone else, with anyone. Wouldn't it be nice not to be in competition with any other human being? Wouldn't it be nice not to be afraid of losing someone? Would you like that? To not be afraid of losing someone? You can have that state. When you give up the motive of wanting that person to comfort you, to love you, quote marks, he doesn't love you, she doesn't love you, to like you, to agree with you. Can you be ridiculed to the point where nobody agrees with you at all? Where all your thoughts and ideas and convictions are seen as the nonsense which they are? Can you take the ridicule in order to start life all over in a new way and say, heaven help me, I'm going to go through this. If people have to laugh at me because I thought I was spiritual and I preached sermons and I wrote books and I gave talks and I found out that I was a phony, okay, I'm willing to go through that in order to be real. Another mistake, this is so important for you to understand. I want to go over it from several viewpoints, because you're going to assume that you do understand it. It's so simple. You're going to assume without knowing you're assuming. So even if I tell you don't assume, you will anyway. That you can begin to watch it and catch that wrong thought. An idea about goodness is not the state of goodness. Or, slightly rephrased, a good idea. A good idea is not the same as being a good human being. I'll ask you a question. How many of you think, may I see your hand, how many of you think it's good to be kind to everybody? How many of you think it's good to be kindly to everybody? Nobody thinks that? Huh? Well, thank heaven for Sally. Because you're being very cautious. You think you're going to be led into something. Don't you? Listen. Don't you know that it's a good idea to be kind? Don't you know that? I'm telling you that it's a good idea to be kindly to other people, to be nice to other people. Isn't it? No? You don't think so? It is good to be kindly to other people. Now, the question is, are you kindly to other people? Huh? No? Not outwardly, socially. You go through the social actions of being nice, but inwardly, you think quite different of that person than the way you behave toward him, don't you? It is a great mistake to think that an idea of goodness is the same as living goodness. Okay? So far? No problem there? Then can we see that it's a mistake to automatically assume that if I jam my mind with moral platitudes, with verses from the Bible, or from a psychology book or an inspirational book, it is a great error to think if I can cram enough of these into my mind and memorize them and quote them to other people, that makes me a good person. Do you mean to tell me that you don't see the contradiction between the way you think and the way you are? How many can see at least some contradiction between the way you think and the way you are? All right. Now, to go back again, it is a good idea to be kindly to other people, but an idea cannot make you kindly because an idea is not your total, whole, free nature. What is hypocrisy, by the way? Hypocrisy is saying one thing and being another, right? So hypocrisy is division, mental immaturity, self-defeat. If I can suffer consciously the ridicule before myself of seeing that I'm mentally good because I have some good thoughts. It is a good thought, little Billy, that you shouldn't hit little Mary. You shouldn't hit Mary. That's a good thing not to hit her. If I could see that I can have good thoughts without it changing me, I will catch my first glimpse of a fantastic fact. That through all these things put together, all these knowledges put together, combined with experiment and hard work, I can have the courage to stop calling myself a good person merely because I can quote and think good thoughts. If all I have is good thoughts, which are good on their own level, but if I take it as making me good, I put a wall up so I can't see the division and can't see the hypocrisy of it, which means I'll have nightmares, and I won't be able to figure them out. All day long, I helped people down at the Red Cross station. All day long, I helped my children. All day long, I did my work well. Therefore, I'm a good person. How come such a good person doesn't feel good? And on and on and on. When I can cease placing the label, which is on the level of thought, of idea, when I can cease placing a label on myself of being good, I will be good. And it's totally effortless, without thought on my part. All right? What does it mean to be really good? And you understand all the things that go with goodness: lack of hatred, lack of competition, lack of trying to win over someone. You know what goodness is. You have an idea of what goodness is. What is goodness? Goodness is the end of my labeled self. Now, there's no way to put it simpler. Goodness results from the hard work of putting an end to all my labeled selves, one of them being that I am a good person, a godly person, a Christian, and so on. When I am not there, what is left? The whole, God, truth, that is goodness. That is my nature, therefore I am good. But not the thought me, the labeled me. I can't ever say I am good unless I say it consciously, knowing that the I is not me, who used to be. A willingness to take ridicule of all my moralities, my goodness, my convictions, a ridicule of that, taken rightly, taken consciously, will begin to change me. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, and those of you listening to this tape, at this point, this is where you must take over. You see, we're walking down this road together, and I'm telling you about it, but there's no way I can tug you. I can't put my hand on your arm and force you to go forward. I can tell you, and now you have to voluntarily walk forward yourself. Now, you've been given many facts tonight, many tremendous facts. If you have 1/10 of 1% of an idea of how great they are, you've gained something tonight, because you can begin to work with that. But now what are you going to do with them when you take them out of here? That's always the question, isn't it? What am I going to do with these with these right ideas? Am I going to be satisfied to identify with them and say, now that I know these ideas, I am good? You know better than that. I have seen some of you in this room behaving, talking, gesturing, outwardly right and inwardly wrong. And I can tell by the expression on your face, by the tone of your voice. That means you were asleep. You're not turning your attention back on yourself as you've been advised to do many times in order to see the state that you are really in while putting on the stage performance. If you want to make it easy on yourself, then you can stop on the level of knowledge. If you want to make it real hard on yourself, not spare yourself, you can begin to change being the kind of a human being you are right here on this earth. It's up to you. Aren't you tired of suffering from your own lies? Aren't you fed up with it enough yet? Aren't you weary of the mess? If so, what enormous good news you have heard tonight. The truth, reality, God, if you want to use that term, God is pure kindness. And asks us to do it, to do what is necessary. Go ahead and cry if you have. Look, we've said it many times. If you want to cry along the road, that's what you have to do, because this is your present state. You have no choice. If you want to scream and holler about how persecuted you've been, go ahead. But remember to use it. In this class, in this group, one of the greatest truths we have is that no matter what our inner state is, how bad it is, how divided it is, how hidden it is, we can begin to use it. We can use the devil to destroy the devil. And that is what this information tonight can enable any of you to do if you'll take it and work real hard with it. And if you won't run away, you don't know what it means to run away. That's why you're not farther advanced than you are now. Can you be aware of yourself running away? I'll tell you how to do it, and then we'll stop. Anytime you are negative in any way whatever, you're running away from the truth that could set you free. Now, we're going to stop running away. We're going to start showing an ounce of courage. And maybe that'll become a pound of courage, then a ton of courage. And then, magically, we will not have a motive to seek courage. We will not think about courage. We will be it. Because God, truth, reality is courage. All right, what would you like to talk about? All right, I'll tell you something then. First, I'll ask you something. Look, start with the fact, and then we can work intelligently with a fact. We can't work with a lie. Now, let's get a fact out into the open with some of you, maybe all of you. Let's find out. How many of you get discouraged? Now, I'm about anything, any level, any way at all. How many of you get discouraged? Dismayed? Well, all right, I'll put it to you very simply. What right do you have to be discouraged? Who are you to be discouraged? Well, isn't it terrible the way the world has treated you? Aren't you persecuted? Aren't you left out? Discouragement is a very subtle and strangely pleasurable form of egotism. Discouragement over anything. Over learning mathematics, learning to do your work down at the office, learning these things in this class. You have no right to be discouraged over anything. But let's stick to discouragement over this, because there's more vanity in that probably than in being dismayed over not being able to add 2 and 2. You like your discouragement, do you? Yes. You don't know how to get out of it, though, do you? You know how you're going to get out of it? I'll use a word that I used once 3 or 4 months ago, and I think at that time you understood what I meant by it, because it can be taken wrongly, as all words can. I'll tell you how to get over being discouraged about anything. Fight. You had better fight that state of dismay, of gloom, of depression. You had better get emotional over it making you miserable. More than that, you had better get over loving your misery. If you didn't love your misery, you wouldn't be miserable over anything. You know why you're discouraged? Because you say, I must learn these things in the books and in the classes. I must learn these things. And you have a secret motive of learning them in order to hang on to yourself in some way, which you will not understand at all. You don't understand that you're identifying with knowledge. And when you do that, you're no better than someone who, in the name of Christ and God and the Bible, burns people at the stake. Because having called yourself spiritual, knowledgeable, then you can commit all atrocities, all cruelties, and justify it. No, you wouldn't do that maybe, but you could sure be cruel to people. Discouragement and cruelty, believe it or not, are brothers. When you're no longer discouraged, you won't be cruel anymore. I know whether you're cruel or not. You know how I know? Because you raised your hand when I asked you whether you were discouraged or not. And I know that no negativity is apart from any other negativity. You see, you told me everything in the world about you when you raised your hand, which you should have done, of course. When are you going to fight for yourself. Instead of lazily closing your eyes and giving way to that overwhelming depression and feeling of violence and of feeling cheated. And by the way, maybe you had better take a look at that particular form of mental and emotional darkness. The idea that you have been cheated out of what? What do you think you're cheated out of? Good looks, youth, money, an easy life? That man has a pension and you don't have a pension? That you're envying that miserable sick man with all his money? What's the matter with you that you envy him? The idea of being cheated, either right now or in the past, will vanish. And you'll see what delusion you lived in, calling it reality, calling it an exciting life, even calling it a spiritual life. Comments, questions? Shake your head, for heaven's sake, and say no. Scream it if you have to. Instead of loving your sleep. You know what sleep is, don't you? Let me get a nice long list as I can think of them. Sleep is laziness. It includes laziness. It includes self-righteousness. It includes touchiness. It includes defensiveness. It includes aggression. It includes sneering at the truth, and God help you if you do that. Well, that's one thing you won't get away with. You've got all this energy. What are you going to do with it? Look at the energy you waste. Look at the energy you waste, for one thing, in running through your mind and in running through your emotions, useless thoughts. Can you catch yourself in useless thoughts and drop them? That is what I mean by shaking your head and refusing to remain in that state. You have much better things to do with your mind than to run a vanity thought or a fear thought through your mind. Why do you entertain fear? Why do you entertain it in your mind? You wouldn't invite a tiger into your living room. That's just what you do when you permit fearful thoughts to invade you and take you over. And listen to this. And to hoax you into thinking they are necessary. You say, well, they're familiar. I guess they're necessary. I remember Dad, he used to get mad and scared, and Ma, she used to get mad and scared. And everybody else does. I guess it's the only way to live. Well, I'll tell you, you just go ahead and live that way if you want. You just go right ahead. It's your life. I'll tell you for one that I'm not going to do it. I don't know about you. You have to make up your own mind. Don't you have any idea of what you do to yourself from the minute you get up in the morning until you go to bed at night, and at night too? Don't you have any idea of what you're doing to yourself? Not very much. Or you wouldn't behave the way you behave. You wouldn't think the way you think. You wouldn't feel the way you feel. You know, it's a odd thing. If I ask all of you in this room, do you want to get rid of fear? You would raise your hand. You'd raise your hand. That's the proper thing to do. You raise your hand. You say, I want to get rid of fear. Then why don't you do it? Because you know not what you say. Because you think the idea of wanting to get free of fear is sufficient. And then maybe in some mysterious way, by coming to enough meetings, it'll go away by itself. Maybe the day will come when a bit of knowledge from this direction and a bit of knowledge from that direction and experience from over there and an aim from over here all come together so that you understand the fundamental fact that only your artificial nature can be afraid. You're afraid? You're afraid? You're anxious? You're worried? Why? You're living from not you, but from the imposter, the stage performer, which you haven't even detected yet, and so the actor has you in his power. Why don't you just drop being afraid right now? Proceeding quite slowly and leisurely and rightfully thoughtful this morning, we're going to do two things at once. We're going to learn to think properly, to use our minds rightly in an elementary way. And it's necessary for us to attend the first grade before we can go on to the second or third. So we're going to be in the first grade by learning to think clearly toward a particular subject. So we're going to learn to think toward a particular subject. The subject being false and true pleasure. We're going to explore it, look at it, see what we've got. We won't understand it thoroughly. We'll understand the words, but there's so much involved in it, in false and true pleasure, which we'll see as we go along. All right, we have the subject, false and true pleasure. We're going to think, first of all, about false pleasure. What is it? What does that mean? You have the word false pleasure. Now, if we're going to think logically toward this, helping ourselves by thinking rightly. We can think that false pleasure would be, for example, wanting to feel a victory over you. We had that last night. False pleasure can be feeling protected by another human being. Feeling protected by having a system of religious or philosophical thought. That's a false pleasure. Look where we are already. We're at the point where we don't see that it's a false pleasure, do we? Otherwise, we wouldn't be involved in it. Okay, what else about a false pleasure? We call it good because it supplies us with security. We call it good, but now we can reason a little bit and see that it's not really good, though we've called it good, because it destroys me. It keeps me in conflict. It keeps me in the state where I have to prove my doctrine to you. I have to prove that I'm right, that I know what I'm talking about. And I get a false pleasure out of preaching to you, out of defending my so-called convictions and opinions. I get a great deal of pleasure because while I'm in the thought that I am right, I don't have to face the fact that I might be wrong. I'm so busy proving myself right, which is impossible, that for the moment I'm protected, in quote marks, from actually seeing that I'm wrong, which would give me a shock, which would frighten me, which would make me feel lost. So false pleasure is anything that keeps me divided from who I really am. And who am I? We can say that in many ways, and I'll say several of them, and I'm sure you're adding your own. I am nothing at all except, in the physical body, a particular representation in the physical form of the whole, capital W-H-O-L-E. That's what I am. That's what my physical body is. But I am not that physical body at all, and it's a false pleasure to think so, because now I think that I have a separate body. I think that I have a separate ego, a separate individuality. And when I think that, then I'm in conflict with you, or I want to take you in order to prove that I am who I imagine I am. False pleasure. Most people on earth live in false pleasure without knowing, again, what they do to themselves. Can I see myself in a situation, listen to this word, can I see myself in a situation where I am behaving unnaturally? I was observing one particular member of this group. I referred to it yesterday, come into this room unnaturally, which means that this particular individual was in tension, apart from himself. Let's stick with this for a minute. Can I watch myself right now, and I'm going to ask you all to turn your attention back on yourself right now, physically, any way you want. Just look at yourself for a minute and see if you can detect any unnaturalness at all. Don't say, I don't see any. Look at it. That means that certain thoughts that are protecting me, so I think, are in action instead of sitting here in understanding. Do it when you're alone and try to see what is meant by unnatural behavior when you're all alone. Example, running the mental movie through your mind where you're the star of the show, where you're the martyr, where you're the victim, where you're anything at all that gives you a false feeling of life. Catch it. And we said last night, you're going to have to fight very hard for yourself, and that is what fighting consists of. Catching yourself right in the middle of a strained, unnatural, hostile, antagonistic mood, bawling someone out in your mind. Have you ever done that? Have you ever bawled someone else out in your mind? That is what is known as false pleasure. Which leads us to what comes next. If there's no false pleasure, what is there? What is there? Then there's something which there has no need to be called pleasure at all, because it's a state in which you are not calling anything pleasurable or unpleasurable, which is a state above thought which divides itself into opposites, but we're not calling it pleasurable or unpleasurable. Then, in this higher state, I've risen above the idea of pleasure and unpleasure, have I not? In this higher state, how am I going to meet life? We had an example of this 10 minutes ago in one of the little short talks. How am I going to meet life? With an absence of a demand to get a certain sensation from the event. Sensation of any kind, what would it be? Feeling superior to someone? Or feeling that, again, that I'm protected by someone? How many of you feel, let's get into that for a minute. How many of you feel that you're protected in some way, psychologically, not physically? The policeman will protect you physically. How many of you feel protected by an association with another human being? May I see your hands? Those of you listening to this tape, do you feel protected by a relative, someone living in your home? And for heaven's sake, do you feel protected by that club you belong to? That association? That group you go to? You feel protected by them? Haven't you studied the faces of the people in that group with you? And can you very honestly see what that facial expression means? And then, do you know what it means for the blind to follow the blind? Also, those of you listening to this tape, and those of you in this room, do you have a false pleasure out of having a hero, an idol? Oh. How about Christ being your idol, your hero? How about some other religious person, religious teacher who has great fame, whether living or not living? That person being your idol, and it gives you a sense of being protected, which means you have abandoned the mind that God gave you to work with in order to find God. Truth has given us the raw materials, and we waste it in wanting to feel secure. And have you noticed that it never works? How many of you feel insecure? May I see your hand? Insecure. I will tell you, I'm telling you this is a fact. Of course, all of you could have raised your hand. I will tell you as a fact, you can reach a point where there's no feeling of insecurity, whatever. None at all. Right in the middle of this mad world, where you work to earn your daily bread and put a roof over your head, but there's no emotional insecurity at all, because you're not there. Because you have seen through the delusion of false pleasure. Oh, I have to stop here because I just thought of something. The false pleasure of arguing, either outwardly or inwardly. Isn't that nice, in quote marks, to argue with someone? Can you give that up right now? Just drop it. Just stop it. And see what a tremendous shock it gives to your psychic system. Just to stop arguing right, and the best time to do it is right when you're about to win the argument, so-called win. You're about to pounce. You get out a little piece of paper that proves you were right and the other person was wrong. Do you have the courage, in fear and trembling, to take that piece of paper and set it down and not get the ego thrill of winning over the other person, so that for the first time in your life you can behave decently toward that other person, regardless of how egotistical or cruel he is to you? So for the first time in your life you see what it means to have a conscience. That shock will do something for you if you can find and should find enough places to give it to yourself. You're in a room with a lot of other people, and it's an open discussion of some kind. You're sitting there quietly observing yourself in relation to them, and they're talking about some subject which they don't know much about. But it just so happens that you happen to know something about it. You're a real authority. You know how to bake cookies. How's that for an authority? And they don't know how to bake cherry cookies. We'll make it more specific. And you know how to bake cherry cookies. They don't know. Now I'm someone. I can tell you that you buy maraschino cherries, and if you buy the big box, can, bottle, it saves you money, and you mix them with coconut. And for the false pleasure of being an expert on cherry cookies, and they did not want to know that much about cherry cookies. Anyway, you or me have sold our soul for 15 minutes of blab in order to feel that I am someone and you are not, because I know all about cherry cookies and you don't. Now, the topic comes up about baking cherry cookies. And you don't do it. You don't say it. Oh, the agony you're going to go through. Oh. Boy. You don't get very many moments in life to really be someone. You deliberately rob yourself of the false pleasure of being the blabbermouthery authority. You deliberately, and you shock yourself like you've never done before. I will come over and shake your hand if you do this and say, sir or madam, you are really carrying out the work into everyday life. You're robbing yourself of false pleasure. You're knowing what it means to die psychologically. You know what it means to at last be on the track of truth and of being in the state of inner transformation. believe it or not, when I do something like this, the shock I receive is true pleasure. A small part of me senses its rightness, and that is true pleasure. Have you ever had the experience of doing something really right and noticing the right feeling it gave you? If you've ever done anything right. But this is very tricky, isn't it? You do understand, do you not, how at every turn on this path we can deceive ourselves and lie to ourselves? It is very important to remember at all times. Otherwise, I'll think I have a truly right feeling, and it will simply be a masquerade for keeping the stage performer in place. All right, true pleasure. We're still thinking logically. I don't have to work and must not work with the motive of attaining true pleasure. Because I'll deceive myself into thinking, for example, that now that I am religious, I now have the pleasure of being able to talk to God in prayers, which is self-deception. If I can see through the deception and the false practice of talking to God, which I call talking to God, if that falls away, then at least in one small area, I will have the true pleasure of not being in agonizing self-deception of trying to get God to do something for me. Never mind if what he does for me hurts you. God give me the promotion instead of Bill. When I go through all this, authentic pleasure is there, which is simply a state of not being in an unnatural state anymore. The absence of the false, right? The absence of the false means the existence of the true. And there it is. And there I am, right in the middle of it, without any need to say, how am I going to find pleasure? How's this for a sentence? But it gets the point over. God, truth, reality is authentic pleasure. Right. An area to work on, which connects with everything else we've talked about, ever talked about, an area which we all can work on, and I know you'll respond to this. One area we can all work on ourselves 24 hours a day is mental blabbermouthery, right? How many, those of you in this room, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? And how many of those of you listening to this tape are mental blabbermouths? Those of you listening to this tape, the hands went up like lightning. How many of you know what it means to be a mental blabbermouth? Look, if you're beginning to see it, you would begin to stop it. Write something down, Connie. No man consciously harms himself. No man consciously harms himself. So this means when I blab on and hold imaginary conversations with enemies, friends, lovers, etc., I go on and on in this beautiful imaginary conversation, getting a thrill out of it. It means I'm in this state of sleep that we talk about, but don't know that I am. How can I know? I am it. I am it. I am that state at that moment. How can I see it? I have to start interrupting it. And deny myself, drop the false pleasure of mental blabbermouthery. How many of you would like to do this? How many of you would not like to do this? Your advancement inwardly depends upon you doing it, whether you like it or not. Mine depends upon me doing it, whether I want to or not. So the choice is very simple. I either do it or I don't, and I take the results of that as my way of life tomorrow. Tomorrow I might be able to catch myself a little bit more often in refusing to review any situation that happened a couple hours before, that happened 50 years before, where in my imagination, the theater of my mind, I am the hero. Can I drop being the hero, the victim, the scholar, the dummy? Can you stop scolding yourself, for example? You mustn't scold yourself. You must see yourself. And there's a world of difference in that, literally. Running yourself down is vanity, and it keeps mental blabbermouthery in place. Okay, how about emotional blabbermouthery? Same thing, right? You feel today what you felt yesterday, and the day before, and the day before. Nothing changes. You're still the same person that you were. We're here, listen to this, we're here in this room today and other days to produce an enormous shock, transformation, change, which we cannot presently see, which we cannot presently imagine. Imagine because it's not of imagination. It's above imagination. And I will see this when I see how I'm taking imagination as reality. When I see what it means to identify with the uniform I wear, to identify with the fact that I'm a clever conversationalist, when I see what it means to identify with myself as being a member of a persecuted minority, etc., etc. You are going to have to say, and I'm going to have to say, society, world, you go your way if you want. I'm not going with you anymore. And to do that rightly, you have to see where you're still agreeing with the world, where you're still compromising, where you still think society has a reward for you, and it has none at all. You know what society can give you? I'm not telling you anything new, I'm sure. You know what society has to give you? Neurosis, sickness, deceit, cruelty, viciousness. That is what society has to give you. Now you ask yourself, and I'll ask myself, am I still a part of this society? Or have I made up my mind to depart from it as best I can at the start. Have I made up my mind to depart from it and go as fast as I can? Have I caught a glimpse of something that is not of this mad world? Something that is truly decent. Oh, you have to see it. So that we don't come here to these meetings and waste what we could have had. You understand, do you not, that most of what you hear is wasted because you're not awake to it. You don't see it. You don't understand it. It's very comfortable to sit back in that chair there and sit back and let some man tell you how to live. Let some man, some woman give you certain fundamental facts. That's so easy. Anybody can do that. It doesn't take any going against. Now I'll give you another clue as to how to make this change, how to give yourself this shocking yourself out of false pleasure. And we'll see if you do it. I won't say anything. I'll just let you do what you want. But I'll tell you how to begin to do it. As you know, on Sundays, various volunteers in the group give talks of just 10 minutes or so, maybe shorter. First of all, will you go against the way you usually feel about things by getting up and giving a talk? I don't care if it's one sentence. Will you start to break the pattern? Will you start to break the pattern? One sentence. That's fine. Great. I applaud you. If you give up and give one sentence where you've never stood up before. But that's just the beginning. How many of you will make it very difficult on yourselves when you get up here by having no notes, whatever, no books, no little piece of paper to refer to? If you want to do it, go ahead. I'm telling you, you want to make it hard on yourself so that when you stand up there and just before you stand up, you said, okay, I'll get these 3 points, bang, 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 1, 2, 3. I hope I can remember them. You stand up there and maybe you will remember them, maybe you won't. All of a sudden, you're standing there, great heavens, I've run out of things to say. That would be very valuable for you if you were to do this. Anyone can reach for a note. Here's my next point. I'm saved. Now, what's the next one after that? I've got it. Okay. You stand up here without any references at all, so you will force yourself to draw on yourself. You could even develop a better memory that way, which is not the point of it. What other ways can you devise to make it difficult on yourself when you stand up here? Make it difficult, not easy. You find out, and then you do it. Maybe you have a habit of, as one person does, of moving around a whole lot. This is a release of nervous tension, isn't it? Moving back and forth. All right. You say, I'm going to stand there with my hands at my side and just give a straightforward talk, a little gesture here and there maybe. I'm going to stand there without moving around. Look what a shock that's going to give you, right? Okay, I give you an assignment because you all more or less talk. I give you the assignment of finding your own ways of making it difficult, making it hard, of going against yourself, of leaving the easy way when you give a talk. You find out and you do it. All right, what would you like to talk about? Yes.
What do I do with all the nervous energy I have?
Well, I didn't ask you to come up front later. Say that again.
What do I do with all the nervous energy? What should I do?
Do you have to even ask? All right, stand up here right now briefly, if you would please. Now you give us a 30-second talk and do just what I told you to do. Larry is giving a 30-second talk.
In asking you the question, what do I do with nervous energy, I am asking seriously, because I do not know what to do with nervous energy.
All right.
I can falsely use it. My 30 seconds is up, sir. I can falsely use it, which I've done all my life. I wish to understand it properly.
Yeah. Okay. Is your 30 seconds up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sit down. All right. All right. Oh, I've got something else for you. Oh, this is tremendous. I'm really going to help you. Instead of asking me what to do about anything, including what do I do with nervous energy, why don't you do the new thing of finding out for yourself? And I have good news for you. Tremendous news. You're quite capable of finding out for yourself. Every one of you in this room, without exception. I know this is a fact. You don't. I do. But I'm encouraging you by telling you that it is a fact, that you can be on your own up there or any place else, where you're the only person in the world on your side. And that's all you need. If you are really on your side, you don't need anyone else, which is not egotism. In fact, it's the end of egotism, right? Vanity always needs allies. We said that before. Yes?
Well, if we ask you what to do and you tell us, then we don't have the opportunity to see it for ourselves, and therefore it doesn't have as great a meaning to us.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, but add one more point. It is right for other people to give you right ideas, because maybe we don't have that knowledge. So you're being given knowledge by myself, by the speakers, by just being here. You're being given right ideas, good thoughts. And there are such a thing, we learned yesterday, yet last night, that there are such things as right ideas. But a right idea does not make me a right human being, does it? I have to go beyond that. And that's the purpose of this assignment I just gave you. Because that's going to shake you, and you're going to appear ridiculous, as we pointed out last night. You have nothing to turn to. You have no notes. And you're just standing there. What am I going to say next? And your tension increases. And you feel like fleeing the stage, or wishing you hadn't got up in the first place. If you ever feel that way, you come back next week and get on again. See, in this room again, you're not called an idiot for doing anything. Not really. You're not criticized for it. Not really. You shouldn't call yourself foolish either. You get up here, if you get up here and behave like an idiot, which simply means mechanical behavior, you should never condemn yourself for it, because no one else should. Maybe some of you don't. The aim of my life, the aim of your life, should be to make it just as hard as possible on yourself. Now, you know what that means, don't you? Do you know what that means? Huh? No? Well, we have to start all over now. The easy way is to remain as I am without giving myself any conscious shocks. Elementary way we do it. Go along with the crowd. When they laugh at that dirty joke, You just laugh at the dirty joke too, because you're afraid that they will look at you and wonder why you're not laughing. Oh, he's a sourpuss. Or he's a prude. He didn't laugh at the dirty joke. Why don't you listen to that joke consciously next time, and then react from yourself instead of from the people around you, because you want them to think that you're a regular fella or a regular gal. That will give you a small shock, because now you're a little bit worried that someone might see that you didn't laugh, and you're going to wonder what they think towards you. Go ahead. You just go ahead and be a slave to the facial expressions of everyone you meet. That's the kind of life you want. You're welcome to it. It's all yours. Do you understand that there's no such thing as a fearful situation? Go real slow on this now. I'm not talking about physical danger. Out in the storm and the bridge is out, that's a instinctively fearful situation, so you protect yourself by not going over the bridge. Psychologically, do you understand that there's no such thing as a fearful condition? You're in a position, say, in a courtroom with some hostile relatives, whatever, where the atmosphere is what? Hostile, oppressive, fearful. Who's it fearful to? Have you ever asked yourself, when you're in a position like this, who is it fearful to? There's only one answer. It's fearful to me. True, it may be fearful to that person over there and that one over there, but it's fearful to me. Now I'm getting smart. If it's fearful to me, maybe I don't have to identify with it. Maybe they want to stay that way. They're getting certain rewards out of it by being afraid, by feeling oppressed. Maybe I don't have to be my own atmosphere of fear. Now I'm getting it. I can be detached from it by understanding, by not enjoying the false pleasure of being in a fearful situation. I am always my own atmosphere, whatever it is. I am always my own atmosphere, whatever it is. Now, if you don't see that, you don't believe that, you work real hard until you do. Wouldn't it be nice not to have to depend on other people, to rely on other people for even right thoughts? We said they're right thoughts. Wouldn't it be nice not to have somebody else tell me what they are? Haven't you been doing this all your life? And look where you've ended up. By letting other people tell you what is right for you, for your life. We've all done it. We didn't know any better. Wouldn't it be nice to be totally free from every human being, including Christ himself? Now, I'll add something, because some of you listening to this tape may call yourselves Christians or something. So that instead of identifying with Christ, you will have the same consciousness that he may have had. Besides, when someone gives you advice on anything at all, spiritually speaking, I'm not talking about advice on repairing your car, that may be good or bad too. How do you know whether someone's telling you the truth or not? How do you know he's guiding you correctly? How do you know that author of that book knows what he's talking about or not? How do you know? How do you know that man giving the talk knows what he's talking about or not? You just going to believe him because you're so desperate for answers? And you just hope he knows what he's talking about? Oh, as if you even do that. Sometimes you may hope that that man is as big a liar as you are, so that you can hang on to your lies, right? You hope that that man will lie to you. You don't believe this? Your prayer is that that man will lie to you, so that you won't have to see what an animal you are. Or can I make it very, very difficult on myself in every situation in order to break through? In order to not be the kind of a human being that I am right now, scared, suppressed, hypocritical, divided. Okay? Has that ever occurred to you? That you want other people to lie to you? Has that ever occurred to you? That you want them to lie to you? Boy, what a pair of friends you make with that other man, both lying to each other.